had on the podcast, we talked about, and I want to make sure don't do what I did last week. Last week I had a disaster on my, okay, I'm not, so everything should be good. Last week I had everybody who tried to join me on TikTok ended up getting a disastrous experience because I was on the wrong network and there was no good internet. So today there should be a much better internet because of that. But we're talking about what makes narcissists narcissistic. Why are narcissists the way that they are? And I know it follows up on a podcast I just had with Dr. Peter Salerno. So if you've not checked that out, you'll want to definitely hear Dr. Peter Salerno. He is on Instagram and TikTok, and I don't think he's really on YouTube, although I've strongly encouraged that he needs to get himself on YouTube because it's just so fantastic. But we had this fascinating discussion about why narcissists are narcissistic and the fact that it is not based on trauma. I mean, we really have this popular belief or understanding the fact that there's no volume. Is there volume now? Because I moved the microphone closer. I was far away. Oh, it's interesting. It's saying that are you still having no volume, Mariel? Will you let me know? Yeah, Teresa, can you guys hear me? It's okay now. Okay, that's because I had the mic far away from me. Time got away from me today. I don't know how it happened. I looked up and it's suddenly like it's in the afternoon. I really apologize for that. So hopefully you guys can hear me now and that we're all good on both Facebook as well as YouTube. So yes, I feel a little a little weird today because I'm getting ready to head out for a big trip that I'm taking with my family. We're going to Europe on Tuesday. So are you still having problems, Serenity? You shouldn't be having problems. I should have started my internet over and I didn't, but because that would have corrected that. Let me know, guys. Let me know if you're still having problems hearing me. I don't want you guys not to have issues. But yeah, I'm getting ready to head out. And so I feel kind of like in between all these spaces, between having the retreat in Orlando, where we had an amazing time with the women who came for narcissistic abuse and recovery. But now I'm getting ready to leave for a vacation. But I want to talk about this topic because I've been reading George Simon's book called Character Disturbances on narcissism in particular, but about personality disorders as a whole. And there's a lot of misunderstandings that we have about narcissists and about personality disorders. And it's interesting why we do this. And I'd love to get some interactions from you all about why you think we struggle to understand narcissism, why we have this perpetual belief, that narcissists are trauma-based, that they're nurture-based. I know that one of the things that Simon differentiates in his book is that we have this perspective that comes from classical psychology. It's the psychology, the classical psychology perspective is that we all are neurotic, that we all have these milestones that we go through that help shape our personality. So for example, if you look at Freud really believed that the first stage of milestone had to do with building trust, and the trust is built through the experience of the maternal supply. So if you have a mom, because we're talking about maternal supply, and this person is really gratifying and showed up and was there when you needed it, really had this ability to connect, and it was safe and sufficient and nurtured you, then you were a person who walked away and had your so-called oral needs met, and as a result then you're able to sort of know how to show up for yourself. Thank you so much for that gift. I really appreciate that. And then Freud went through and said then there was the anal stage, as well as then there was the Oedipus complex, and in other words, it all kind of based around sexual development. And then there were other people that came along and said, no, it's different than that. It's based on self-acceptance. You had Jung who came onto the scene, then there was Carl Rogers, and each theorist kind of came in there and had their own perspective of human development. So psychology is really a soft science. I know we don't really like to say that because it implies that it's less than the hard sciences that are based on mathematical principles, things that are measurable. Not that psychology isn't measurable, but it's very difficult because humans are so complex for us to directly make causal effects. We can't say, for example, if you hug kids this many times in a day, you're going to get a child who's like this. That's just not possible to be able to have that kind of outcome. That people are so complex and there's so many variables in our lives that there are a lot of things that shape people into who you are as a person. It's not, so we can't say things are directly cause and effect. It's way more complex. Years ago, I read an article that I deeply appreciated about why did Van Gogh cut off his ear? And the upshot of the article was there were lots of reasons why Van Gogh cut off his ears. We're never going to fully understand every one of them. And multiple of those multiple reasons are true at the same time. And I think that's one of the things that us as humans don't like. We really want things to make sense. We wish it was simple. We wish that there was one thing that we can consistently point at as an explanation for why people do what they do. But unfortunately, that's not how psychology works. So as a result, that leads us into the spot of then how do we understand what happens, especially when you have something like a personality disorder happen in your life, when you cross paths with someone who's so disturbed. In other words, I'm using the word disturbed to define something that's not mainstream, that doesn't fit the norms, that their perspective feels foreign to you, feels alien to you, and that when you attempt to understand them, you end up getting it wrong. And when these types of relationships, because they're so strategic, they're so exploitive, getting it wrong is dangerous to you. It's harmful to you. It ends up negatively impacting you. When we encounter people like that, we typically like to place our worldview, our explanation on top of them and say, this is the way that they are, because this is what shaped me. So therefore, because it shaped me, I think it shapes them. What we struggle to understand, which is why I really like George Simon's work, as well as Gregory Lester is another person, Peter Salerno that I just interviewed. Why I really like their work is they're saying, no, people are formed in different ways, and that some of us don't have all the same parts and pieces as others of us do. So as a result of that, we end up having people who are different from us, who view things differently, do things differently from us. I'm pausing for a moment because the YouTube is really having problems with me. For some reason, whatever the program I'm streaming isn't playing nice in the sandbox with YouTube. So if you guys are struggling, I apologize. It's related to that. I don't know why my streaming program is having problems, but it is. Anyway, hopefully it's also commercials. Yeah, you're right, Teresa. YouTube loves to insert commercials, so I get it. But I just wanted to comment. I keep getting this warning sign that's driving me nuts. On top of it, I think I'm out of focus and I can't change it, because in order for me to change it, I have to do something that messes up my connection on the internet. So I'm not going to do that. So I apologize for those of you who are seeing me on a landscape that I'm not in focus. I apologize for that. Okay, back to my train of thought. So what I'm saying, why most of us don't understand narcissists and they completely perplex us, disturb us, is because the audio is crackling. That's really weird. I don't know why it's crackling. Because if I have a fan above me it's out of balance, so it's ticking, but that's the only sound in the room. It's just ticking. I'm also getting a sign over here on Facebook that my frame rates are too low. I don't know what to do about that. Unfortunately, today is just one of those days. It's going to be an internet problem day, I guess. The name of the other person you're asking about, Teresa, is Gregory Lester. Gregory Lester. You're going to have a hard time finding his content. He doesn't do anything like on social media, but he was very instrumental in the DSM-5 when it came to the personality disordered section of the DSM. Usually does continuing education for professionals. That's how you'll find him. I mean, I've done searches for him on the YouTube and I just don't find he doesn't pop up. But he does trainings. That's how those of us who know him is because, Alejandro, it's not because of your eyesight, it's because I'm out of focus and I apologize. And it bugs me. I have this new setup anyway, like you really want to know. And the only way for me to get it in focus, and it would mean, and there is a way for me to do it, but it would be really, really In fact, I wonder if, like, does it help to get closer? Or does it help to get it further away? Anyway, I don't know what to do about that, but I'm sorry. And it will bug me. I know that I'll get lots of comments of like, you're out of focus. Why were you out of focus? And I don't know which direction it is, if I need to get further away or closer. But I digress. Okay, back to the joys of being live, right? Back to personalities, disorders, and narcissists. So narcissists, what we do is we try to understand them using our own perspective. The way that we're constructed, we try to explain them from that perspective. So for example, if you are a person who had a really bad childhood and maybe one of your parents was hurtful, dismissive, maybe your parents was really withdrawn, and maybe they attacked you a lot and it shaped you, it made you insecure, and it made you end up feeling like you can't do good enough in your life. Maybe it made you afraid of taking risks, like you don't want to you're afraid of failure. That unfortunately then will shape the kind of decisions that you make and shape even the people that you pick in your life, because you kind of expect that. You sort of, you're familiar with it, not because you liked it or enjoyed it, but it's familiar to you, so you end up replicating it. Partly because I think we like to master something. So we do these things, we get into these repetitive relationships, partly just because we hope that it'll turn out better, that it'll be different. But our problem is we then assume that about narcissists, that maybe they're trying to repair something, because most of us who are kind of neurotic, that's what it's called, neuroticism, we're neurotic, we assume that they're neurotic too, but they're not. See, that's the thing. Narcissists aren't neurotic, they actually have a character disturbance. So in the hierarchy of disorders, think of it this way. The top level is healthy, like together, secure. By the way, I want to let you know that person, that group of people don't actually exist. Or if they do exist, there's so few of them that most of us have never met them. Maybe people like to put, maybe they would say Buddha might exist there, maybe Jesus existed there, maybe some other like big religious leaders might existed there, people that we think highly of or we tend to see as a prophet, maybe they might fit that category as long as they're not a cult. But most of us exist in the realm of neurotic, meaning we're insecure, we're controlled by our guilt or our anxiousness. Maybe we don't really see ourselves quite in the full correct way, and we're operating out of this anxiety or guilt or stress. But then at the bottom level, I'm going to leave the mid-level alone for a minute. So we got healthy, neurotic, and then at the bottom level is psychotic. Psychotic is people who are not in touch with reality. They're literally, they see things that aren't there. They believe things that aren't true. They're not seeing the world as it is. They're seeing some version of the world that's actually not real, and they're interacting with that not real world. I actually had the benefit of working at a psychiatric hospital that treated people who came in for psychosis, and they would come in because they had some kind of psychotic break. Maybe they were schizophrenic, or they had a really terrible break from their bipolar disorder, or maybe they had something highly traumatic, or maybe it was a drugs gone wrong, but for whatever reason they lost touch with reality. So they would believe things like, I'm the mother of Jesus. I actually met her a few times. Or they might believe, for example, that they can fly. That's really scary and dangerous. Or they might believe that there's something inside of them that's rotting and eating them. They have these beliefs that are obviously not based on reality. And what was so amazing in the hospital was once you start them on the right treatment, within a day or two, that those symptoms were gone. It responds really well to medication, and then they would be back to themselves and interacting with you in a very normal way. And often they didn't remember the psychotic break, thank goodness, because it's pretty embarrassing. And so then they would talk to you like you and me, like having a normal conversation. So that's psychosis, at the low level of psychosis. Character disturbances live in between neurosis and psychosis. They live in this space of there is something different about them. And what Dr. Salerno says, as well as George Simon says, is that they have character, and probably Dr. Lester says, they have character deficiencies. Now, what is a character deficiency? Well, You and I are made up of all these strengths and all these parts and pieces. Maybe that's the best way to say it. It's not really strengths, it's parts and pieces. It's how you experience yourself, how you conduct yourself in life, how you're able to resist impulses, whether or not you get dressed and get out of bed and function today. What kind of judgment do you have? Do you have any motivation? Are you a disciplined person? Are you somebody that's able to set goals? Are you able to control your emotions when you have them? You have all of these sort of pieces to yourself. Empathy is another one. We talk a lot about that on social media. We talk about, are you able to relate to other people and understand what they're going through and are sensitive to them? Are you able to even reflect on your own behavior and observe when you don't do something right and sort of learn from your mistakes? All these things are parts and pieces. Some of us don't have some of these parts and pieces. They're literally missing. And the two of them that are really critical, they're all really critical. If you want to be successful in life, you need most of them, and you need most of them to be highly functional for yourself. So, for example, if I'm a highly impulsive person, I can't contain what I'm doing and resist impulses, then I'm going to really struggle. I wouldn't be here, by the way. I would have missed this appointment. I probably would be out doing what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. So I wouldn't have any money. I might be broke. I might be sick because I wouldn't be taking care of my health. I wouldn't be saying no to things that I should be saying no to. I might even be struggling with addictions. So you can see how impulse control can lead to a whole lot of problems. If I'm a person who's struggling with self-reflection, for example, it's called introspection, I would be a person who really struggles to adjust what I'm doing and measure whether or not what I'm doing is working. I would struggle to have any self-observation about myself. It's sort of like a tape measure. I wouldn't be measuring myself and see how I line up to anybody else. A good example of poor introspection is on American Idol, whenever somebody's trying out and they have a terrible voice and they don't know they have a terrible voice. And you end up thinking, how can they not know they're a bad singer? Because they can't carry a tune. They don't really understand timing and tempo and melody. Why did they think that they could come up to the show and show up and that they're going to do well? Well, that's an example of poor introspection or limited self-reflection. That person doesn't have an ability to look at themselves and say, I don't do so well carrying a melody. I don't really actually hear the tune. Maybe I'm a little tone deaf. That would be an example of that. So when it comes to narcissists lack a few things. One is they lack the ability to recognize other people as people. They don't really see you as a separate self. They struggle to everything is through the grid of themselves. They're the only player, not only the biggest player, but they're the only player. Like if you're playing chess and you have all the pawns and the king and the queen and you have the rook and I'm trying to think of the bishop on that board, you're moving all these pieces and maybe you're the king on the board, but you need all these other pieces on the board. A narcissist would say the only critical person on that board is the king, and it's me. Nobody else is here. They're all pawns. They're all to serve me. They're not actually critical players in themselves. So as a result, they don't see other people as people, which is part of the empathy problem. But also they have a hard time. They know what you feel. This is where we get tricked because we think we see emotions on them. Then we say, oh, they're empathic. No, they know what you feel in order to manipulate you and get what they want, but they don't care how you feel. It doesn't impact them. That's what's called instrumental empathy. They have empathy, but it's instrumental empathy. It's the ability to say, I'm aware that you are upset by this. Now, how can I use that upsetness to my advantage to get what I want? How can I maybe use it to intimidate you or to force you? Or maybe I can really exhaust you so you just drop it. So it's not like, oh, I feel bad that you're upset. It's exploitive. Like you said, Teresa, it's very exploitive. So it's purposeful in a direct, they use it almost weaponize it, I guess. That's the word I'm looking for. They weaponize your empathy. So it's not that they can't sense what you're feeling. It's that they're using it to their advantage. Another thing that they're missing is they're missing conscience. They really struggle to have a conscience. Like, for example, they they just, because of their superiority and their entitlement, they really believe that they deserve what they want when they want it. They don't think that, in fact, they almost see that rules and restrictions and policies are optionals. It's like how can I get around this? Why do I need to do this? What is the advantage of it to me? And they're willing, because of this lack of, there's this, it's a kind of like, most of us have fear. When we feel like somebody's going to be upset with us or we're going to get in trouble, we end up being afraid of the outcome of that. But they're not afraid of the outcome of that. They lack that natural adaptive fear that most of us have. Instead, because of this lack of that whatever that is, it's sort of an adaptive fear that kind of modulates and moderates our behavior. Because they don't have it, then they're not managed by it. It doesn't cause them guilt or remorse or concern. It doesn't bring up pain for them. And because of that, then they view all the rules out there as negotiable, not necessary, not even, it's almost like it becomes, what can I get away with? I just need to find the right angle to get around this because nobody's going to control me. That's how they kind of perceive it is everything is what can I do to get around it? I just am not going to be managed by this. And the problem is with it, because it's so uncomfortable when people do this, that most systems aren't prepared for that. And that's what you see in court systems, and maybe you even see in government systems, is that we're not prepared for a person who's willing to sort of bulldoze their way through something. We sort of, because we're nice and because uncomfortableness bothers us, then it ends up controlling us and they get what they want when they want it. I've seen my ex do this lots of times. He would encounter a situation where it was against the law, definitely against the rules, and he would just end up pushing his way forward, negotiating and cajoling and doing whatever he could do until he got what he wanted. And he ended up putting people maybe he might pay somebody off, and he ended up putting people in the situation in which he often got what he wanted because he was able to do that. So it's hard because those of us who are more, like I said, at that tier of neurotic, and we're controlled by guilt and shame, and we're insecure, and those things matter to us, we end up thinking then, why do they do this? Why are they getting away with it? It just is really, really disturbing. So what I'm proposing is that, here's one thing, is that we stop seeing this as broken, wounded people. I don't believe that most narcissists, I won't say 100%, but I'm going to say majority of narcissists are not broken, wounded people who are reacting out of pain. I think that's one of the things that Dr. Peter Salerno said in that interview that really hit me, and I know it hit a lot of you because you guys have commented on it. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, on TikTok and on Facebook, I posted an interview yesterday by Dr. Peter Salerno saying that trauma was not the cause of narcissism. And one of the things he said in that interview that I thought was super powerful is, and this is what got me, and boy, I saw this and I didn't know what I was seeing. He said that they're not upset about hurting you, they're upset about how it impacts them. So if you see these big crocodile tears and this brokenness and all this regret, they're not regretting the pain or the loss of that relationship or the pain it's caused you. They regret its impact on them. They regret the way in which it's making their life like miserable or hard. So there's some examples that George Simon gives in his book, Character Disturbances, that really hit me hard. Often he says, when we're talking to people and we hear this emotional regret and pain, we shut down and become sympathetic, and we don't listen long enough to find out that it's not the kind of regret that you and I would have. So let me give you an example. He uses really extreme examples that, due to social media requirements, I really can't use because it's just too violent and triggering. So I'm going to give a more tamed, mild down example that's a little more like allowable here. So say, for example, somebody stepped on your foot. Okay, I'm going to really make this ridiculous. Say a narcissist stepped on your foot, and they're now crying and boo-hooing about the fact that you have a broken foot. And maybe they're crying and boo-hooing about the fact that there's this incident happened. Now, most of us would read into this situation and say, oh, look, oh, they feel so bad. Look how sympathetic they are towards the person that they injured. By the way, they'll go out and step on another person's foot the minute they have an opportunity to. But if you had a chance to really analyze why they feel bad, they would say, well, I'm upset because that person's foot got broken and then they went to the hospital and that cost me time and I couldn't go do what I wanted to do because I had other things that I wanted to do, but I had to stop and take care of them, so that really messed up my life for the afternoon. So it wasn't what you thought it was. See, we saw the first part, we saw the emotions, and we attributed their emotional sensitivity to what our emotional sensitivity would be, but it wasn't. Their emotions was a reaction to their loss, their perceived, I agree, Malibu, inconvenience, how it cost them. He gave us an example in the book I thought was really powerful. There was a guy who was involved in SA, and he was part of a group who did SA, if you know what I mean. And all of them got charged and went to prison. And he was the last person who was involved in this crime. And so as a result, he didn't finish, if you follow me. And because he was boo-hooing about the fact that he didn't get a finish and he still had to pay the same prison time that everybody else who then did this bad behavior did, and they had the same prison time. He thought it was unfair that he got charged and sentenced the same for an act because in his mind he didn't get what he was pursuing out of it, if you all follow me in very vague terms. Sick. That's sick. So it's not, this person wasn't upset he affected a person's life. He wasn't upset that he was just upset that it wasn't fair to him. So here's how it showed up in my relationship. A couple ridiculous examples. One of the things that my ex got upset over was in my marriage with my first husband, he and I made a lot of really great financial decisions. We didn't take big vacations. We didn't spend much money on clothing. We were just really frugal people. We didn't spend much on trips, much on gifts. We were just very, very careful people. And as a result, when my husband passed away, he left me in a fairly decent financial position. Well, when I got into the second relationship with my ex, the narcissist, I then made him co-owner of a company. We were both admins, and I didn't realize that when I gave him co-ownership that I also then basically said to the government of Mexico that he and I both equally contributed to the capital expenditures of the company, when only it was my capital expenditure, not both of ours. So when we were divorcing, because both of our names are on the company, he then felt like he should be able to walk away with half of the capital, even though he contributed none of the capital, because in his opinion, life has not been fair. What do you mean it's not been fair? You didn't save, it wasn't your money, you didn't make the same kind of same decisions, you have lived a very hedonistic lifestyle, and you didn't participate in the capital, funding of the company, and you will still want half because in your perspective, life's not been fair. It doesn't even make sense. And by the way, what I participated was out of a life insurance policy payout. So you're saying it's not fair that my first husband died and I happen to have a life insurance payout? That's not fair? Anyway, you can just see how it's just, it doesn't even make sense. It's ridiculous. But they'll do things like that. And the thing is, for us, when we get into these positions, it bothers us. We end up I actually paused and I started feeling, I'm embarrassed to admit I felt a little bad that life's not been fair. What do you mean it's not been fair? He had the same opportunities to make the same hard decisions, to control his impulses as I had. He had the same opportunity to invest in relationships, to even buy life insurance on a spouse if he wanted to. But fortunately for him, none of his spouses have died. You know what I'm saying? It's just ridiculous at all levels. Here's another really wild example of just weirdness, just weird style of thinking that doesn't add up and make sense. So my ex had his identity stolen at some point in his life. It actually was true. I found the person on Facebook, the person who took his identity and who's using his social security number illegally in the United States. I found this individual. This individual, by the way, is doing very well. They've actually done something with his social security number and made a life for themselves. And one of the things that they had done is they actually gone out and they have got an MBA with that, with his social security number. And like I said, they've made a life for themselves. So he found out this person had an MBA that's in his name with his social security number. And he said, I should go contact that institution, the educational institution, and ask for the transcripts and ask for proof of the diploma because that MBA belongs to me. I'm thinking, no, it doesn't. You didn't earn it. It's not your MBA. You can't prove that you had an MBA because you didn't go to school and you didn't learn that stuff. And he said, well, it's in my name and it's in my social security number, so doesn't that belong to me? And I'm thinking, no, and what I'm saying is the education doesn't belong to you, so you technically don't have one. Just because one's been called out in your name with your social security number doesn't mean you have one. You see what I'm saying? It just doesn't make sense. But because of their sense of superiority and the sense that they're just above the rest of us, not like the rest of us, then the rules don't follow you and I. And the interesting thing is, if my ex ever met you, if he used to hire and fire people, if he met you and found out that you were lying about your education, oh, sure, he would have fired you. He would have thought, how dare you? How dare you to think that you're that big and that person and have that kind of education? How dare you lie to me? But he had no compunction against lying to you, to presenting information to you that's false, because in his mind, he's outside of the rules and the rules don't follow. So here's why I think, and before I'm going to start taking you guys' questions today, here's where I think it takes us understanding about narcissism and narcissists. And some of the criticism that's come in about this interview with Dr. Peter Salerno that we did on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse yesterday, some of you saying if it is related to a literal character deficiency, if these things are neurologically hardwired losses in a person, then does that mean that there's no hope? Should we then just say there's a whole class of people who basically are taking space up that shouldn't be on the earth? I know, by the way, that a lot of you have been injured by somebody like this, and you think maybe they don't deserve to take up space. Maybe they don't deserve the oxygen they're consuming. And I understand your anger and your rage over that. I really do, because we walk away. It's one of these, the thing about this disturbance, this character disorder, it's a disorder in which the person suffering doesn't suffer, but they make everybody around them suffer. So I understand you've suffered, and you may end up thinking, yeah, I don't want this person in my life. I would like this person actually not to be in life. I would be happier if they're not occupying the world. I really would feel better. But here's the thing. It doesn't necessarily mean there's no hope. It really doesn't mean there's no hope. I know a lot of you thought, oh, if it's genetic, if it's a biosocial problem, if it's related to hardwiring, neurological hardwiring, then we just need to wipe off a group of people or wash them off or wash our hands of them, because then we can't do anything about it. But that's actually not true. For example, here's, and this is something that I said in the podcast extra. So for those of you, by the way, I always have exclusive content. And if you guys are a subscriber on, if you're a subscriber on YouTube, you automatically get access to it at the higher level. So there is now an exclusive interview with Dr. Peter Salerno. But here's an example that he and I talked about on the podcast extra. For those who are not YouTube and want access to it, you become a subscriber, a paid subscriber on Substack, and you can have access to it that way. But I'll give you a practical example. My oldest son was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia in 2019. And I don't know if you guys know, but this form of leukemia is very aggressive. It's an adult form, and used to be 50% mortality rate on it. Thank God they found an amazing treatment. And the treatment is it's actually a genetic chemotherapy. It's genetically targeted chemotherapy. So what they did is it targets the mutations in the genes and then changes them, and it gives a cure. And my son is now 5 years out from his diagnosis, and we now can claim that he's been cured from leukemia that used to have a 50% mortality rate. That's an example of how just because something's genetic doesn't mean there's no hope. What they're finding with this group of people is that the typical type of therapy doesn't work. And the problem is most of us clinicians as psychologists, I'm a psychologist by the way, most of us have been trained in traditional styles of therapy, talk therapy, insight-oriented therapy doesn't work with narcissists. They need more confrontational. They need to be having someone in their who clinically talks about how their personalities are disruptive and harmful to other people. They need to be called out. So it's a different type of treatment that unfortunately most people are not trained in. So that's part of the problem, is we don't have a whole batch of clinicians throughout the world who are informed on how to treat this group. We also don't have genetically targeted medications to help treat them. But I have a feeling that going forward, as we become more informed about this disorder, that we'll have better treatments for them and better interventions as a result of that. Yeah, I agree, Malibu. Like a lot of you are going to tell me that you saw the narcissist in your life manipulate people around you, that they got really very good at manipulating psychiatrists and therapists and psychologists, and as a result, it went wrong because it just wasn't the kind of treatment. They ended up out, bamboozling the very people that they were supposed to help you and to help them. And I would say right now we just don't have enough clinicians who are trained to be able to treat this. But I do feel confident, just like we've treating AML leukemia, the type of leukemia that's very related to genetics. We can treat that. I'm confident at some point we're going to be able to treat this better too. But here's what I think we need to stop doing, okay? I want to have some call outs before I start taking your questions. We need to stop attacking victims for being victimized. We really need to stop doing that. For example, the more of you, here's how I see it happening. For those of you who are aware, on TikTok, I shared my story. If you go into the comment sections of my story, it's called How I Met, Married, and Got Scammed by a Gold Digger. If you go into the comment sections, you will see me reamed out. Horribly, horribly taken on. I got told, here's some of the sampling of what I got told. That my degree was a fraud, that there's no way that somebody should take my Ph.D. back. My children must be terribly ashamed of me. My late husband must be terribly ashamed of me. That I volunteered for the abuse. That I was not scammed. I signed up for it. That's just an example of what I got told. There are hundreds of comments like that, not a few. It wasn't just a troll or two. I got hundreds, maybe thousands of comments, because some of those, one of the most popular one, I think it's like 1.6 million people have viewed it. I really heard it. I really got told that was my fault that happened to me. But you look at this video who's blowing up right now on YouTube. It's over 10,000 views in just over a day on YouTube about Peter Salerno, and you'll see the number of people who are not happy that Dr. Salerno is suggesting that narcissism is a genetic condition, that it actually, there's something, that there's neurological hardwiring. We feel now like we're not sympathetic. We're not supporting the narcissist. So let me put this side by side. A victim who got exploited and lied to by a narcissist and scammed for money by a narcissist, that's my fault. And I deserve hate for that. And I deserve no pity for that. By the way, I was never looking for pity. I don't care if you guys don't feel sorry for me. I'm not looking, I don't need that from anybody. That's not why I tell anybody my story. I'm telling you to warn you that this group of people exist. That's only why I wanted to let you know. So it's my fault that happened to me. But if we attribute responsibility and accountability and we say these people are intentionally harmful and it's not because they're broken, wounded people, we're cruel and mean and how hurtful, how offensive. Do you see the irony, the disparity? This is like, makes no sense. I just find it super strange why we hate victims and we love to protect abusers. I don't get it. So I think in order for us to start having more help and honest change, we need to get off and stop attacking victims, stop seeing them as deserving of it just because they got taken advantage of. Because one of the things we've mixed up a lot is we see learned helplessness and we end up thinking that they deserve it because they didn't do anything about it. But do you know what it takes for somebody to have learned helplessness? Now, granted, there are personality types that just prefer to be in a helpless position. It's a dependency, it's called a dependent personality disorder. Yes, there are some people who are like that. But the majority, and I certainly in my practice encountered them, they're the people that whenever you suggest a really helpful outcome or advice, they're like, yeah, but, nothing ever works. But most of the time, what you're encountering is somebody who's actually been emotionally battered into that position, and they have lost all sense of mobility and volition, motivation, because they've had somebody so critical, so negative, so hurtful, so in and out of their life and scary. I talked to somebody yesterday who's every time she attempts to leave, her partner becomes scary, that they just give up. They find it easier not to make a change because this person's going to make sure. Remember, I told you, toxic people, when they win, they love you losing. But if they're going to lose, they make sure you lose too. They make sure there's mutual mass destruction. When we see that person who can't get out, and that's how I felt about it. I mean, if I left too soon in my story, he would have taken half. He would have literally taken half, and he would have negatively destroyed my life on so many levels that would have really put me into a very different position today if I had allowed him to do that. So I stayed longer, partly for me to come out as a better winner. So most of us see all that and we end up thinking, well, you asked for it. Well, you don't know that this person's basically, there is no good option. They're using threats, intimidation, real tactics to keep you trapped and stuck. So we end up thinking this learned helplessness is just a weak person, and we don't realize that it's there because that's how they're coping. That's their only option. And they've been had it happen so often to them in such a bad way that they have now kind of given into it. They've given up and given in. It's the only way they've learned to survive. We need to stop attacking that group and see that as a symptom of abuse. It's a symptom of abuse. All right, it riles me up too, Ophelia. Riles me up really much. So I'm going to now look at my comments and see what you guys have to say about it. Okay, so Hafna just asked, do I have anything to say about mothers with narcissism that groom their underage daughters? Can you say more about grooming them for what? What's the purpose of the grooming? Groom them to what? Stay with them? To get something from them? What is it that you see them do? Yeah, am I doing okay? Oh, or you're talking to somebody else. Oh, you're talking to DK. Yeah, DK, I agree. The commenters definitely felt like they were smarter and they were totally above being taken advantage of. I think here's why I think people get really uncomfortable with weakness and with victimization, and why they see victimization as weakness. I think that they see victimization as it scares them. They don't like to think of the world as unjust. They really like to think that we have more power and autonomy when we really actually don't, that there are people that are that good that can outsmart us. I think that makes them uneasy. I also think that some of them are arrogant and that they just believe that they're above it because they've never encountered it. And really what they have not encountered is just a smart enough predator. They haven't met a smart enough predator. So as a result of that, they end up thinking then it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist for them, then it doesn't exist for anybody else. So those are some of the reasons why I think, I definitely agree. I do think there is a group of people who are predatory and they don't like anybody calling anybody out. So the fact that I'm saying something is uncomfortable and they're going to attack whoever says that because they also themselves are very toxic. Okay, so you came back with a response. I think you did you? Or did you just repeat it? No, I'm not seeing you say any new. In psychosis, like you mentioned, from being with the narcissist, or are they the narcissist? No, psychosis is normally psychotic breaks occur for organic, meaning like internal biological reasons or genetic reasons or extreme stress. That's why, or due to some foreign substance, foreign chemical introduction to the body. So generally psychotic breaks are related to a schizophrenia. So that's a kind of a permanent condition somebody has. It's something gone wrong with the mind and the body and it's an illness. Or a bipolar disorder when it's untreated and it's really an extreme experience. You can have psychosis with that. PTSD can cause psychosis. That's extreme stress. It's called a brief reactive psychotic break. But no, normally people aren't driven to psychotic breaks unless it's PTSD. That usually doesn't happen for those reasons. And it's rare for PTSD to become you have a psychosis with PTSD is really, really rare. So it's not related to a narcissistic relationship. I've never seen that. Not to say it can't happen, I just never seen that. I agree, Mariel. Our experiences are experiences. And yeah, we shouldn't have to negotiate what's true or real just because somebody who's toxic doesn't agree with us. I totally agree with that. Christine, I am so sorry that your two children have been in a cult-like situation that's resulted in a loss of contact and connection with you. That is so painful. And I'm not surprised when narcissists love to start the smear campaign, by the way, the moment you meet them. They're already setting up a narrative that's really actually quite creepy and scary about you. They have a way in which they view you and they're explaining who you are to the rest of the world. And it's kind of like preparing. I don't think they always think that the relationship's going to end, but it's like they preemptively plan for the end, even if they hope that it doesn't end. And the way that they do that is they start to, they make themselves bigger and better and all that, and that making people feel like they need to select sides. Like if you don't agree with them, then you're not aligned with them, and that you're not friends with them. They'll kind of make it an ultimatum without really making it an overt ultimatum. So people feel like they have to pick sides and choose. And then they'll put your kids in that position where they feel like they have to pick sides and choose in order to have a relationship with this person. And here's another thing that often happens around toxic parents is that the most fragile parent, kids know who's the most fragile. Kids know that which parent, if they don't stay close to and stay aligned to, that they're going to lose that relationship, and they want a relationship with both of you. So unfortunately, because of that, they're willing to forgo the relationship with you in order to keep the relationship with the parent they're more likely to lose, because they know you're not going to go anywhere, which is really awful, because it means that you then pay the penalty for all that toxicity, which is, like I said, completely unfair. I'm still waiting for Hafna to talk about grooming children. I haven't seen it come up, the rest of it. Yeah, I would love to know what they think, what narcissistic moms do. Narcissistic moms groom their children for a lot of things. Off the top of my head, oh, I answered you? You did? I didn't see it. Okay. That's the problem with these messages keep. Do you have anything? See, I see that, and then I don't see the answer. I see the first and I don't see the second. Maybe you repeated it up and I missed it. I'm now looking for your photo. You have a distinctive photo. Man, I don't see it. I don't know if you can repeat what you wrote. I'm seeing up and down and I do not see your response. I just see the question and then I see that you said I answered this. It is weird. Sometimes, somebody else says they don't see your comment either, that it just didn't show up. I don't know why it didn't show up. Yeah, it is blocking some of your messages. I do see that. Maybe it blocks it long enough, it disappears. Maybe that happened. Narcissists never suffer. I'm not for sure I completely agree with it. I do think they suffer, but I think their suffering, it looks different. I think their suffering is that they feel a restlessness and a chronic unhappiness. I think also because of their sense of grandiosity, entitlement, they really believe that they're gods or kings and queens, and life should work that way, and that it doesn't. And I think that causes them pain and uncomfortableness because life doesn't roll the way that they want. But I don't think they suffer from the consequences of the behavior. I don't think that. I do think that they justify what they do. They believe that it should work the way that they want it to work. So it's not like you and I would suffer from our behavior. We'd walk away and feel bad and feel guilty for it. Maybe we'd even regret and but I don't think they feel that. Okay, you just said, did it work? All right, so I'm going back. I see oh my goodness. And then I said, see, did it work? Nope, the message is gone again. There's no message in the middle. Literally, there's no message. I don't know what's happening. That's weird. Yeah, it's blocking it. For some reason, TikTok is blocking that, and I don't know why they've blocked it, but it's not showing up. That's really strange. Do I think this is a societal issue about how we distort what is seen as stronger, weak? That's a great question, H. I think that our fears of being vulnerable and being injured make us resistant to victimization, makes us uncomfortable when we see the truth. Like I already, stuff coming in around P. Diddy, for example. I have a feeling we'll never fully know the full extent of that abuse that happened. But I also know that the people who are in his camp and who really have benefited from their relationship with him are going to have a hard time coming out and calling it out for what it was. They're just going to struggle with that because we admire his successfulness and we also admire his charisma. I think, unfortunately, a lot of us are fawners. We may not realize we're pick-me's, but we're pick-me's. That we in ourselves get a lot from our connection with other people. And when we see people who charismatically draw people in and have a lot of sway and influence, we find that highly attractive. And we don't want to lose even though we did get nothing. Here's the thing, if you think about it, when you're around a highly charismatic person, what do you actually get from that person? Really, what benefit do you get by being seen by that individual? Nothing really, because they're selfish. Thank you so much. They don't benefit us other than just they're being visible to them. But we act like it's so much. We act like, oh my goodness, I've been so impacted by this person. I don't know, oh, I'm now seeing your comments about, yeah, that's why they're blocking it. It's too explicit. You're talking about something that's really uncomfortable, Hafna. That's why they're not letting it through. Yeah, we like the highly charismatic, confident people, even though it's not based on anything valid or real, make us feel powerful being in their sphere of realm of influence. We like it. So as a result, because we like it, we're willing to not see all the bad things that they're doing. We're more likely to overlook. And I think we don't like victims because it makes us, for one, I think it's too close to ourselves. We're uncomfortable with seeing the weaknesses in ourselves. And I also think that it doesn't bring us anything. To like a victim actually takes energy and costs us something. They don't benefit us personally. So, I think it's for lots of complex reasons, unfortunately. But yeah, I agree, Ophelia. Kindness is seen as a weakness in this culture, and that's really bad. I do agree that it's a bad thing. I'm confused about relationship issues. Amber, what are you confused about? Yeah, Hafna, what I would suggest, I would be very happy to try to talk about this with you or talk about it if I could figure out a safe way with social media to talk about it. In fact, today I asked I had this big aha about something related to my own history that really undid me today. In fact, it was P. Diddy's story has been bothering me. And I had this flash of why it's bothering me about something in my own past that was very, very painful. And so I put it into ChatGPT and it erased the message, literally erased the message and said, this violates our policy content. Fortunately, ChatGPT still talked to me and answered me, but the message, what I wrote, is gone because it didn't like it because it was too explicit. So unfortunately, we have to avoid explicitity here or to certain kind of content because it's just, I don't know, it's not acceptable, I guess. Yeah, I never liked him just because I think censorship has a purpose, Malibu, but I also think sometimes it goes too far. In our efforts to save people, we often sometimes hurt people. Is there medication for a lack of empathy? No, unfortunately, Suzanne, there is not. There's no way to make somebody more empathic. I think there's ways to work around it. I'm not really great with affective empathy. I kind of struggle with that because I'm autistic. But I have a lot of cognitive empathy. So I'm able to put myself in other people's positions and imagine what life would be like for them. So can somebody learn to do that? Yeah, that's affective empathy may be not learnable, maybe a quality you have or you don't have is one of those kind of deficit character pieces that I talked about earlier. You either have that piece or you don't have that piece. But I do think that cognitive empathy is definitely, you can educate yourself to have it. Yeah. So you struggle with that too. Yeah, I have I'm on a spectrum. I'm autistic. So as a result, I'm not always empathic. I'm not cold. I'm never cold, but I don't always, I don't always feel what other people's feelings. So what is affective empathy? So affective empathy, a great example of that would be you're watching a Hallmark card commercial and you start to tear up and get really emotional about it. Now, I find my affective empathy varies depending on the subject. So for example, if you were to talk to me about a loss that you had and how grief is really hitting you and it would activate my grief about losing my husband, then I would resonate. I would get really teary with you and feel what you're feeling. That's emotional or affective empathy. Cognitive empathy is literally the ability to imagine life from another person's perspective. It's walking in the shoes of somebody else. There's other forms of empathy too. I'm trying to remember what they are. One of them I just learned about recently. I thought was fascinating, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. That's just one of the downsides of getting older. My memory doesn't work the same. Yeah. Yeah, now narcissists, what we often see narcissists is that they have empathy in the sense of let me take it back. They have what's called, there's compassionate empathy. So there is another way of thinking empathy. Compassionate empathy is that I care about what happens to you, that it matters to me. Whereas instrumental empathy is I'm using what I know about you and what you're going through in order to benefit me. I'm being strategic about what I sense about you and then flipping it so that it works for me. That's instrumental empathy. I agree, Eric, it's weaponized empathy. It's instrumental empathy. So most of us hopefully have compassionate empathy, either whether it's affective or a combination of affective and cognitive empathy. But most of us hopefully have compassionate empathy where we feel like we feel bad for the other person, we sense what they're going through, we care what they're going through. Whereas instrumental empathy is that now that I know what you're going through, I'm going to see how I can play off of it to my advantage so that it benefits me. That's instrumental. Which, back to what you just said, Ember, is true. Bringing up losses and betrayal and issues that you've struggled with, they weaponize that. They'll flip it on you and then find a way to turn it so that then they'll either one-up you or they'll play against it, make you more fearful. Maybe they'll even lean into it as a way to sort of hurt you. Maybe they'll then make decisions and then justify it based upon the things that you shared with them. They'll do something about it that's very strategic, manipulative, and exploitive. Yeah, there's a lot of narcissists that have empathy that do use it, and they definitely destroy their family over it. I agree very much, Suzanne. No, a narcissist, Sarah, would never allow you to treat them the way that they treat you. Never. In fact, here's the thing, Sarah, that I think most of us don't understand. When you allow them to treat you poorly, they see that as disgusting. They see that as a weakness about you, and they don't like you for it. They actually find it kind of contemptible and look down on you, and then they justify more bad behavior because you're putting up with it. They would never put up with it. Never. And because they wouldn't, and they think that they're all that, then they would think then therefore you deserve it because you're putting up with it. I hope that logic makes sense. It's not logic. It's not good logic, but that's the kind of logic that they make. Thoughts on revoking parental rights of a toxic or abusive partner in the context of narcissistic parents? How do you view the sentiment that one can be a terrible partner but still be a good parent? It kind of depends. I mean, there are people who are good parents, but they're not great partners. I don't always necessarily see them as one and the same, but often they are. They're not always, but often they are. And I know when it comes to the court system, they don't actually care. They don't care that your partner was a bad partner. They just care whether or not your partner is showing up for your kids. Absolutely. So that's the question they're going to be asking. And I know in your mind that if they're not good to you, why would they be good to the kids? I understand that, but that's not how the courts see it. But a narcissist won't even allow me to have a differing opinion. Yeah, exactly, because remember, I don't know if you caught this part, Ophelia, but When it comes to a chessboard, when there's all these different players, there's pawns, bishops, rooks, kings, queens, etc. They only see themselves. They're there and everybody else is a pawn. So you're not really another key player. You're just a pawn. So if you have a different opinion, how dare you? Because this person's all that. You should know that. Why would you assume anything else? So in their minds is like you're a pawn speaking up when you're just to follow the rules. Yeah, it is very, very maddening. So I'm glad, Sarah, that helped me explaining that the way I explained it. It's interesting. Kate's comments being controlled too. So Kate, you said if you're I know why. Because you're Kate, I'm going to block you. I don't like spam on my account. So you're actually probably not a real person. You're a bot, but I'm now going to block you so that you don't have access to my account. I want to let anybody know who is a bot. If you're here and you're a scammer or anything and I catch you, I do get you rid of you on my account. I don't tolerate that. It's not permissible. So just know that I'm always constantly trying to keep the accounts clean. Oh, I'm glad Linda, that this has really been helpful for you. I really am glad this has been enriching. I felt so scattered coming in today because of it, like this live came on me faster than I was ready for it, but I'm glad that it felt good. And I know that they always tell you, lead with a good hook and start right off from the top, and it was a mess. So I apologize for that. But thank you guys for being here with me and coming back. And I want to let you know that I won't be here next week. Next week, I will be with my family on vacation with my sons. And but I'll be thinking of you and missing you guys. So I really, but I'll be back the following week. And the following week, I'm going to be talking on a topic that a lot of you have asked me to. So but watch out for this because it's coming up. Many of you have asked for me to talk about reactive abuse. I'm going to be talking about it. So next week, I'll be talking about, not next week, in 2 weeks, I'll be talking about reactive abuse. If you guys have ever felt like you've lost it, like maybe you're the narcissist, maybe you get accused of being a narcissist, I want you to come back in 2 weeks and join me for that. You're moving, Cynthia. Is that a good move? I hope it's really good for you. But yeah, in 2 weeks, sorry, I'm always like talking to multiple people, but in 2 weeks, I'm going to be talking about reactive abuse. Is it abuse? In fact, Rosanna Fay joins me on the podcast, and she had an interesting view of reactive abuse. So I would love to hear what you think of her definition of a reactive abuse. So, and I would also love to, no, it's a vulnerable topic. Any of us have ever lost it. We don't like that. That feels really, really embarrassing. So many of us have very uncomfortable feelings about that. Uncomfortable feelings about ourselves. Hey, thank you so much, GMB. And thank you for being one of my subscribers here on this channel. I appreciate that. All right, you guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. On Tuesday, I think it's the end of February. End of October. I know it's October. End of October, we'll be talking about reactive abuse. You guys take care, stay safe, and I'll see you then.